Okay, so I've just taken delivery of my Carbatec TS-C250P, which has got the high-low. This isn't actually quite right. I've got the high-low fence, and so yeah, I'm going to start to unbox it and put it together. So it comes in quite a few boxes and so on. This is one box. It's got things like handle, and then over here we've got a mitre gauge, the blade guard, extension wing. So that's the height adjustment handle, I think. There's an extension wing over there. That's the high-low fence, an extra filler piece. There's the rail, and the motor covers down there. So it's all in a lot of boxes and a lot of different positions. But yeah, I'm going to start taking them apart now, or sort of start opening the boxes and sort of start to piece this together. And so inside the motor cover packaging also comes this, I guess it's probably sort of 2 or 3 meters worth of dust collection flex. So that's quite nice, that's in there as well. And so the first job apparently is to put the motor cover on. So we'll just do that quickly. And so that just slots on nicely, just on these little hinges. And then there's a little bolt around this side just to tighten it closed. And so the next job is to attach this extension wing. I think you can either put it on the, what will be left, this would be the left for me, or right side. So I'm going to attach it to my right, because I'm going to feed out this way, out the garage door. So this is actually pretty tricky to do, but basically I've got a bolt and 2 washers, and that's going to go into there, and then I'm going to hold that up, and that will go into that tapped hole there. So I'll get this piece vertical, and then I'll pivot it over so that I can put in the next bolts. This will obviously be a lot easier with an extra pair of hands. So there you go, that's the extension wing on, and it's just on 3 bolts, just finger tight now. So obviously this can move around, but yeah, that's what it says to do. So just up, finger tight. And then this is the next extension wing, and that will go on the end here. So I'm going to just attach that, and again it just says do all that finger tight, and then I think we'll put a straight edge across the top and then tighten it all up nicely. And then next up is the matching extension wing. Actually, I thought it was just going to be one on that side and then another wooden one, but there's actually one on both sides of the blade. So this one is going to get attached onto this side next. And now I've got both the extension wings on roughly, I'm now basically going over and kind of basically getting these perfectly flush, using the spirit level, making sure they're perfectly flush, and then I'm just tightening up these bolts underneath so that they're really nicely done up, nice and tight. Okay, so I've bolted them on, but it's actually quite hard to see, but you can see this wing is tilting down, as is this one. So I'm going to have to shim this kind of inside edge here, basically with a bit of masking tape to kind of try and sort of tilt these up a little bit. So I'm going to try and do that now. Okay, so this is turning out to be a pretty tedious process, but I'm kind of nearly getting there. I'm having to shim this end with 2 bits of masking tape and that end with 1 bit of masking tape. But slowly but surely I'm getting there. I think you can just start to see at least this end now is pretty level with this, but there's a bit of light coming through there, so I'm just tapping it with a hammer here and there and just generally kind of getting it to be really flush. So I've shimmed both sides now, and that's pretty level. It's not, I think it's pretty much impossible to get it 100% level, but yeah, it's pretty good. And with the table level, I can now move on to installing both of the hand wheels. So I'm going to do that. So one of them here, the other one I just unpack. I've also got both a locking nut as well. So grab those and install those onto the front here and the side one there. And I have to say that so far, the build quality and everything is really, really nice. These are, all intents and purposes, identical. And yeah, they feel really nice. So obviously cast iron. But yeah, really impressed with the build quality so far. And both of these go on exactly the same way. It's kind of hard to show you, but they kind of slot in. You can just about probably see in there. It's kind of a little groove for them to slot in, and then this just goes in and screws in like so. There we go, nicely tightened. Yep, so that's both of those hand wheels on now. Next on the list is to install the front rail by the looks of things. And inside that box is 3 parts. I'm guessing probably this part and this part together make the front fence, and this part probably makes up the back part. So yeah, we'll start to piece that together now. And yeah, just doing a bit of sort of checking, but basically this larger right angle is, I think, the front piece, because then this tube then sits on top of that, and the smaller one goes at the back. Basically, there's lots and lots of holes in the front one, but only a few of them line up with the 4 holes that are on the table and the extension wing. So yeah, that appears to be the only way they can go. No real way to know whether what I've done is right, but I basically attach these 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're connected at the back with bolts and washers and split rings. And all it says in the instructions is to make sure it's parallel with the fence, also parallel with the table, and below the mitre slots. So yeah, hopefully what I've done is correct. We'll find out in a bit, I guess. So once again, the instructions are pretty vague for the rear rail, but basically as far as I can tell, again, I won't know until it's all put together, but it appears that basically you put 2 of these on here, and this is kind of like this part of the rail is facing up. It seems as though there's only 2 places that this screw and this screw can go in on this rail. So yeah, hopefully that's in right now. And now both the front and the rear rails are on. I can apparently drop the guide rail on. It's really nicely made. This piece here can be slid out and rotated around so that this bit is perpendicular to the fence, so you've got a sort of high-low kind of setup. Yeah, really nice. Let's see what it's like locking it down. Yeah, really good and solid, positive. So yeah, that's on now. Okay, so next step is to attach this thing to the underside of the front rail, I think into these 2 screws. So we'll do that quickly. Alright, so this took me a bit of time to figure out, but basically I kind of thought that, you see these 2 holes here, that there would be holes on the top of this thing, and then that would go underneath and screw in from above. But no, there are only holes on the back, and no holes anywhere on the rails that fit those holes. So you can see them, yeah, a bit hard to show you. But then I found this, and I'm pretty sure that this has got the right size hole in it. So I'm going to open this up, and I think that basically, yeah, this has got holes on the top here and there. So I think this is like a sort of mounting plate for the magnetic switch. Yep, so bit of super sleuthing, found that this plate needed to be attached with these little screws again to the underside of here, and then this guy can kind of get strapped onto the side here, and that's the switch attached on at the back. Just 2 screws that go into the plastic of the switch itself. Bit of dust. Yeah, that's now on. So that seems to come with a little pin here, which I guess goes into, yeah, it just goes into there. And just to show I'm not being too dumb, the the instructions aren't particularly obvious. Just as install the magnetic switch onto the bottom left hand side of the front rail using two M5 8x8 hex bolts, 5mm lock washers and 5mm flat washers. See figure 11. So it's not particularly explanatory. Anyway, next step, onto the saw blade now. So got myself the wrench that comes with the saw. I'm going to loosen the arbor here. You've got a little button here to press to stop that from rotating. Loosen that on, hold it off, pop the blade in, and then put the nut back on, and that should be the blade installed. That's just got the locking nut and blade flange up against it. Now time to put the blade guard assembly onto it. So I believe it's going to slot into here basically. So these two parts here are going to slot in there. So we'll give that a quick look at now and do that next. As I suspected, this sort of slots in to where the riving knife would sit, and you come around here and there's a little sort of detent, it's hard to show there, that kind of just pops in and goes through, and then locks in to where that little thing there, you can see it sort of locks in and holds it all in place. So that's the blade guard on now. Of course, what I probably should have done is should have probably replaced the zero clearance insert first. So I'll remove the blade guard and then replace with the zero clearance insert. Let's do that now. And yeah, as I've come to fit the zero clearance insert, I found out that I think the blade is too far over. So that must mean, so I'll just remove this again. So that must mean that this flange here must have to sit that side of the blade. So I'll just take that off now as well and put that on. And that'll shift the blade over a little bit, so it'll sit in the middle of the zero clearance insert. Okay, so just moved all of that over. So let's see what happens now. Hopefully I'm going to put the zero clearance insert in. Yeah, there you go, and that's sitting right in the middle of the hole now. I shall potentially make myself my own zero clearance insert at some point anyway. And then there's a little screw that just goes in there, and that holds that down in place. So I'll just tighten that in with the Allen wrench. Okay, and then obviously just slotted the blade guard back down. And that's all fitting nicely. I'm guessing this pipe here probably fits in the back of that. And then obviously the dust extraction will come off the back of that. So it looks quite sleek. It'll be interesting to see how well this blade guard works and how good it is at or how, you know, how much it fouls or that sort of thing as wood goes through it. But yeah, hopefully it'll be good. So at this point, it feels like all the major components are in or connected. So now really the next big thing is probably to sort of like do fine adjustments to make sure things like the fence is parallel to the blade and all that sort of stuff. But what I really want to do is turn it on and see if it actually works. So let's knock the little safety pin out of that and let's see if it turns on. Ooh, first press, nothing. Probably means I need to do something else to it. Oh yeah, probably just need to pop that out. Oh, there we go. Okay, let's pop that out. And here we go. Woo! It's on. It goes. A little bit of a hum to it. Well, it's on and it's working. So I think probably what it needs to do is I probably just need to shim the bottom of it somewhere, just to, it's got a bit of a vibration to it, so I think I just need to probably shim the bottom, but it works. So let's try pushing a piece of wood through it. Okay, so there was a bit of a rumble going on there from the blade, so I just took it out again and repositioned one of the flanges that goes over the arbor, and now that's sounding a lot better. There's still a bit of a rumble. Yeah, now it's pretty good. Just did its inaugural cut just to see what it was like. I mean, this is birch ply, and the blade's not particularly great, so that's eaten that up nicely. But yeah, I think, if you put the correct blade on, it should do nicely. Okay, so we know it turns on, we know it cuts. Time to see how accurate it is. So the first thing I need to do is check to see how parallel the fence is with the blade. The easiest way to start doing that, I think, is to look at, I've brought the fence right up close to the inside, or the right hand side of the mitre slot, and you can see there I've got sort of, I don't know, that's about 1/2 mil, something like that. But up here it's quite a bit more, so we just need to toe the fence in just a fraction. The manual says that it can have up to 1/64 of an inch, so what's that, about 1/2 millimetre difference, but I think that's probably just a little bit on the large side, so we'll just need to basically use the adjusters here and here to basically toe it in slightly. So the adjusters are actually, they're not these ones, they're actually on the inside, and so you've got one here and one on the other side there, and you basically sort of drive that one in to push the guide that way, or this one in to push the guide this way. So that's how that works, and you just very, very finely adjust them little bit by little bit. So the saw comes with this stick-on scale, and so the next job is going to be to fit that. So I believe it wants me to take the fence and push that right up against the blade, and then I guess we'll try and get the zero of this scale to line up with the roughly line up here, because then this is actually adjustable slightly as well. So now I've got the fence perpendicular to the T-slot as it requests. I now bring the fence right up against the blade here, and I've just used a little piece of tape here. I've just put the tape there right in line with that little with the marker. I'm going to remove the fence, and then I'll be able to stick down the scale, which is going to sit on the top here. Yep, and now I've just tacked that down in place all the way along the length, and then I'll probably just bring the fence over on top just to check that this is kind of in a nice position within the sort of looking glass of the fence. Yeah, and as you can see, it's just, the tape's just a little far kind of up, so I might just reposition it down a bit, because whilst I can read centimeters and millimeters, inches are a little tricky to read. See, I don't really use feet and inches that much, but yeah, might be nice just to position it down a little bit. I just shunted it down just a little bit, just so it's easier to read feet and inches if I need to. And then what I'll do is to actually kind of really dial this in, once I'm kind of set up properly with dust extraction and so on, I'll do some test cuts and then check them with the micrometer or the verniers, and actually just check and see what this reads out. And then of course I can just unscrew these little guys and just slide this around slightly, just to make sure it's really nice and accurate. Of course, there's one downside to this scale, and that's that when you change the position of the fence from high, as it is at the moment, and you roll it over to low, this scale won't actually line up. So I'm guessing there's a bit of maybe there's a bit of maths to be done to make sure that every time, if I'm using that scale in the low position, that I'm actually being accurate. Or maybe I'll just only ever measure off the blade. And to switch this round, all you do is you just undo these little guys. There we go. And of course you can just slide this out, and then slide it back in like that. And then of course do these guys up again. So yeah, and now of course that scale isn't actually accurate to the distance between here and the blade. So yeah, that's just probably worth remembering. So a nice little feature I've just been looking at is whilst you can obviously set this is the angle adjustment for the blade. You obviously set that with this. What's quite nice is there's like a sort of a positive stop mechanism in here. So this little grub screw here, you can adjust that, and when the kind of the trunnion knocks up against this piece here, it's a positive stop. So I've just actually adjusted that so it's perfectly 90, and just kind of unwound it a few times and put it back on, and it is still really nice. Let's see if you can see, it's really, really nice and square. So that's excellent. So I'm little bit by little bit sort of going through and getting everything really, really nicely set up. I've checked that the mitre slot is actually perfectly parallel to the blade, and that appeared to be perfectly set from the factory, so that's good. The fence did need a little bit of adjustment, as I said, to toe that in a little bit so that in turn was parallel with that. And I've also checked that it is actually parallel with the blade. It's actually very slightly wider at this end than it is at that end, and that's just to allow for the workpiece to sort of move out the way a little bit as you push it through the blade. But yeah, so far so good. Everything's looking pretty well set up and trammed in. The last thing I needed to do is actually put in this additional table extension, and that just needed some bolts in here and here. If you look underneath, there they are, just that one and that one, and of course similar, little focus, similar at the back. Oh, well, here we go, camera in here, similar to the back, and of course that just needs to be leveled up. I actually probably should have done that before I put the guide rail tube on, but I forgot. Oh, I thought it was coming later. So it was just a case of removing the bolts underneath these guys that run along there, and then I was able to just kind of rotate this guy towards me a bit here, and just allowed me to get those screws in. So yeah, I didn't even really lose any accuracy on here, but even if I have, again, not to worry, just easy enough to slide this guy around a little bit. Yeah, and that's basically the bulk of the setup done, and it's looking pretty sweet. So really what's left to do is to set up dust extraction from here and here, and so I'll bring my dust extractor in now, probably put that over there somewhere, and run the pipe along the ground, and I should probably sort out things like this cable. I'll put that across the floor nicely with some tape so it's nice and safe, but yeah, we are 95% of the way there. Looking forward to actually sort of doing some test cuts with dust extraction so that I'm not covering the place in dust. So quick tidy up now, and then we'll hook up the dust extractor. Okay, so the final piece of the puzzle is now in place. I've put my dust extractor in and connected up the main hose there, the 4-inch hose, and then there's a black one, goes all the way up into the guide, or into the blade guard, and there's a handy little sort of, I don't know, bracket that holds the that hose out of the way. As we can probably see, there's quite a bit of dust on here. That's just from 2 cuts of some 9mm plywood, and I think that's definitely the fault of my dust extractor rather than the saw itself. I think the saw probably does quite good dust extraction, but this is pretty weak, so a bit of an upgrade on that to come. But in principle, yeah, everything's really well set up. I need to do some really fine, accurate cutting to see how this comes out, but yeah, very pleased. So it's been really good, obviously, to sort of work with it and find out its limitations and, you know, learn what it's capable of doing and that sort of thing. Obviously, big first edition was an outfeed table. Needed that for anything sort of, you know, when it came to sheet goods and that sort of thing. But the other main thing I've done is that I've actually moved the rails, both the front and back one for the fence. And I actually moved those out because originally it could get up to about 800 mil of capacity on the right hand side of the blade. But now that I've moved both the front and rear guides over, I can now get 101 centimeters or 1010 millimeters of capacity, which has really changed how I've used the saw. So it needed a little bit of thinking out, but actually it really wasn't that difficult. All it needed doing was repositioning a few of these bolts. I had to do a bit of drilling into this bar, into this L bar. But then that allowed me basically just to move it right out, so it now sort of sticks out here. And this one was very simple. There are just some nuts underneath, and that just, you know, I just move them along one basically. So now this will easily push right out to about, it'll give me about 1,000 mil of capacity really easily. I actually think that if I really wanted to, I probably could move this out one more and the other one out one more as well, and I think I could get even more. But 1,000 millimeters capacity pretty much does me, and that means I can deal with any 2 meter by 1 meter sheet goods or 8x4 sheet goods really easily. The other thing I did pretty much immediately was go out and buy myself some decent blades. So this is a fine cut-off blade. I think this is 80 or 90 tooth. I did actually start the process of building my own zero clearance inserts, and these are a couple bashes at them. These are actually Perspex with wood backers, because there's actually not a lot of space underneath of this. As the blade comes up, the arbor actually kind of touches underneath of here, so it's a bit tricky. This is only about 3 or 4 mil deep, and there is some adjustment. There's little adjustment screws here, so you can raise that and level it. But yeah, it's not brilliant. In the end, what I ended up doing is actually filling the original zero clearance insert that came with it, filling it with bog or builder's filler, 2-part filler, putting a couple coats of that, and then actually just raising the saw up through it to give myself a pretty good zero clearance. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a lot better. I think another modification I'd like to do is actually cut some holes along here to help allow it to suck more dust in underneath. That's definitely a little addition that I think it needs. So yeah, those are some of the main alterations I've made. I had a bit of a rumble that occurred. There's actually a pulley belt inside, a pulley pinion that was inside there that actually come loose, but my local dealer replaced that pretty quickly, and yeah, that rumble's gone away. So yeah, no problems since. And in general, it's kept its alignment and trueness, and it's been very good. I still use the blade guard quite a lot, although the dust extraction isn't amazing. The blade guard is excellent. It's very good. The only thing that you can't do is you can't bring the fence too far up because it starts to strike the blade guard. But I think that's pretty much the case with any blade guard. But in principle, yeah, it does work. I think I'm still using my old 1.5 horsepower extractor, and I think that's still probably part of the problem. But to be honest, it's done me pretty well up until this point. So yeah, there we go. She's a good little saw, and I think she's gonna do me very well for quite some years to come. Looking forward to continuing to make some modifications, building lots of things with it.